I watched my son smash my laptop against the kitchen wall and walk out without a word. 17 years of raising him, 15 years of sacrifices I thought mattered, gone in a single, furious gesture. My fingers were still trembling when I reached for the shards of glass and plastic scattered across the floor. It wasn't just a laptop. It was the last piece of respect, the last thread of trust I had in my own home. And the look on Tyler's face, that cold, calculating hatred, made it clear. In his eyes, I'd failed completely. My name is Alex Mercer, 44 years old, working the same electrical contracting job in Cleveland I've had for 2 decades. I'm not rich. I'm not famous. I'm not even particularly clever. But I'm patient, and patience is about to become my weapon. Evelyn, my ex-wife, the woman who built an empire out of nothing while I quietly kept our household afloat, was the kind of brilliant woman who makes ordinary people feel small just by existing. And Tyler, my own son, had fully embraced her world, despising mine. He believed I had ruined him, that I had ruined everything. Before we dive deeper, hit that like button if you've ever felt underestimated or ignored, and comment below what you would do in my situation. I should back up. 15 years ago, Evelyn and I were young, in love, and full of dreams too big for our cramped apartment on the east side of Cleveland. She wanted more than fluorescent-lit offices and weekend football games. She wanted power, influence, success. I believed in her. I still do. I sacrificed for her. I believed in the future she promised. For a long time, it worked. I helped her launch her consulting firm from scratch, working nights filing paperwork, covering bills, holding down our small world while she built hers. But slowly, almost invisibly, I faded into the background. Evelyn's world became a glittering empire. My world, the home, Tyler, the quiet moments, seemed irrelevant. Tyler, he adopted her ambition, her cold efficiency, her ruthless drive. And that morning, when he threw the laptop across the room, I realized I was no longer part of their universe. I wasn't even a footnote. But here's what they don't understand. Revenge isn't about anger. It's about patience, about waiting, learning, understanding weaknesses, and then striking when the time is right. 15 years of being ignored, undervalued, and underestimated had taught me one thing. I could wait. And when I struck, it would be devastating. The laptop lay in pieces, the smell of smoke from my coffee lingering in the air, and I smiled. Not out of joy, but out of power. This was just the beginning. It wasn't a single moment that broke our family. It was a decade of quiet erosion, one carefully placed brick at a time. Evelyn's rise was methodical, almost surgical. At first, it was inspiring. She transformed her small consulting gig into a citywide operation, landing contracts with tech startups, then mid-sized companies, and finally, Fortune 500 clients. I watched from the sidelines, proud, exhausted, invisible. Tyler idolized her, not me. I realized that fully one night when I came home from work to find him presenting a business plan to her on the living room floor. He was 14. He had graphs, spreadsheets, and a confidence that should have been impressive. Instead, it made me sick. He was practicing Evelyn's tone, her posture, her strategic thinking, everything she had spent years honing, while I had spent the same years teaching him values that apparently didn't matter. "You're falling behind, Dad," he said without irony. "You have to think bigger." I stared at him, realizing that the boy I had raised, who once clung to my side during thunderstorms, had fully morphed into Evelyn's version of perfection, sharp, ambitious, dismissive of anything outside their empire. And Evelyn, she noticed nothing. Or maybe she did and approved silently. I wasn't sure anymore. By the time Tyler turned 16, our home had become a museum of her accomplishments. Expensive artwork, the latest gadgets, awards in glass frames lining the walls. I still mopped the floors, paid the bills, and cooked the meals, but my presence was tolerated only insofar as it didn't interfere with her business or Tyler's education. It was during one of those Sunday dinners that the first real shot across my bow came. Tyler had just received an award at school for some coding competition, and Evelyn's business associates were over for brunch. I tried to compliment him, quietly, hoping to connect. "That's nice, Dad," he said flatly, eyes never leaving his tablet. "You wouldn't understand anyway." The words hit like a physical blow. I choked on my coffee, swallowed hard, and forced a smile. Evelyn laughed politely, the kind of laugh that hid more contempt than warmth. I realized then that my role in our family had been officially written out. I was a placeholder, a background character. Over the next few months, the isolation intensified. Tyler spent weekends at Evelyn's corporate retreats. He dressed like her, spoke like her, and began subtly correcting me during conversations, as if he were the adult and I the child. I tried to argue once about priorities, about values, about the importance of being present. "You just don't get it," Tyler said, voice sharp, as if I had personally failed the entire world. "Mom is building something bigger than us. You're holding her back." That was the moment I realized the betrayal was complete. My son, my flesh and blood, was fully aligned with Evelyn against me. I was alone, dismissed, and hated, but I was also alive, patient, and aware. I began to observe. I watched Evelyn's habits, her pride in public appearances, her rigid control over schedules, her dependence on predictability. I watched Tyler's patterns: overconfidence, impatience, arrogance disguised as ambition. I cataloged every weakness silently, like a ledger, noting who they trusted, how they reacted under pressure, and what could be manipulated. I didn't act immediately. Revenge isn't impulsive, it's calculated. I bided my time, quietly repairing my own reputation in small ways. A neighbor needed electrical work? I did it flawlessly, discreetly earning respect. A local charity lost funding? I donated and volunteered under the radar. I became invisible, but more importantly, I became credible in the circles that mattered, not theirs, yet. Quick pause. If you were in my shoes, would you fight back immediately or wait? Comment below. I'd love to hear what you'd do. And then came the first opportunity. Evelyn made a mistake, small but telling. She outsourced a critical part of a project to someone unreliable, confident that her systems would catch any errors. They didn't. The client noticed, but Evelyn blamed her junior staff. Not a soul in her office knew the truth. The failure was predictable, and it could have been catastrophic if leveraged correctly. I filed the memory away. Tyler, meanwhile, flaunted his successes on social media, boasting about internships, certifications, and competitions. He left a trail of arrogance that was almost too easy to trace. Each post, each brag, each dismissive comment toward me was ammunition for later. I realized something crucial. They believed I was powerless. That complacency was my greatest strength, and I would use it, slowly, methodically, until the day they never saw coming. I spent nights planning, sketching possibilities in my mind while the city slept. My vengeance wouldn't be immediate. It would be elegant, precise, and devastating. They had built a fortress around themselves, but every fortress has a blind spot. Evelyn's ego, Tyler's arrogance, their overconfidence in my invisibility. Those were the keys. And as I lay awake in the quiet apartment, listening to the hum of the city below, I smiled to myself. 15 years of being underestimated had brought me to this moment. I had patience, knowledge, and time, and I knew how to wait. The slow burn was underway. The first strike doesn't need to be obvious. In fact, the more invisible it is, the more powerful it becomes. I learned that early. That's why I didn't call Evelyn out when she made mistakes, or scold Tyler for his arrogance. I watched. I waited. I mapped their world in minute detail, every habit, every blind spot, every moment of overconfidence. It started with small things. Evelyn had a weekly call with a potential client she trusted implicitly, a tech startup in Columbus looking to expand. She bragged about the deal to Tyler during breakfast, detailing every clause and how confident she was in their secrecy. I made a note, mentally recording every time she left her computer unlocked or her emails unencrypted. Tyler, meanwhile, made the same mistake over and over. He flaunted accomplishments without considering the audience. Every internship, every certificate, every smug post about business strategy was cataloged. His hubris would become my ally. I began testing their patterns subtly. One evening, I walked past their office while Evelyn reviewed a presentation with her staff. I pretended to be collecting laundry, just moving through the space, but I noticed she always left the door unlocked if she thought no one was paying attention. A simple thing, almost meaningless to her, but to me, it was the first thread of leverage. Meanwhile, I reached out quietly in my own world. I reconnected with old contacts from my contracting days, people who respected my work but had never really known Evelyn. I made small contributions to projects, lent expertise, and stayed under the radar. Slowly, I rebuilt credibility in the real world, separate from the one Evelyn had monopolized. I didn't have to rush. That was the advantage of being underestimated. Evelyn and Tyler believed I had nothing. They assumed I was harmless, content to fade quietly into irrelevance. That assumption was my weapon. Then came the opportunity I'd been waiting for, a mistake that would open the first real door. Evelyn had a major presentation in Chicago, pitching a new contract worth millions. She left Tyler in charge of preparing the files, a task she assumed he could handle flawlessly. I observed from a distance, noting every misstep. Tyler had copied the wrong financial projections into the pitch deck and misaligned the charts Evelyn had spent hours perfecting. Most parents would intervene. Most fathers would scold their child. Not me. I watched silently, smiling. Tyler had assumed he was untouchable. Evelyn had assumed she was indispensable. Both were wrong. I began leaving subtle reminders around Tyler's workspace. A misfiled report here, a gentle nudge toward an outdated source there. Nothing obvious, nothing traceable, just enough to seed doubt. He would panic when Evelyn called, try to correct the errors at the last minute, and fail. The first real sense of satisfaction came quietly, like a slow burn in my chest. Tyler called me one night, frustrated, desperate, trying to figure out why his meticulously planned project kept collapsing. I didn't answer immediately. I let him stew. Let him realize he had underestimated me, that his arrogance left cracks in his armor. Don't go anywhere yet. This is where the slow burn revenge truly starts to take shape. And Evelyn, she remained blissfully unaware. She assumed I had no interest, no power, no role. That made every step I took all the more delicious. I didn't need money, influence, or authority yet. I only needed time, knowledge, and patience. And I had 15 years worth of all three. By the time I decided to intervene directly, it would be subtle. A misplaced email, a whispered rumor, a tiny oversight magnified by their overconfidence. I wasn't seeking to destroy them, not yet. I was reshaping their world to remind them of a truth they had long ignored. I was not invisible. I was not powerless. I had been underestimated for too long. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by blueprints, notes, and reminders. Each misstep, each arrogance, each careless habit I observed was cataloged, analyzed, and filed away. I sipped my coffee, bitter and cold, letting the satisfaction settle in. This was just the beginning. One by one, I would dismantle the illusions they had built around themselves. Tyler's arrogance, Evelyn's pride, their reliance on predictability. And when the time came, it would all collapse perfectly. The slow burn continued, quiet, deliberate, and lethal. The first real cracks appeared subtly. Evelyn didn't notice them at first, not because she was brilliant, but because she had grown complacent. She trusted her routines, her systems, and, most importantly, the people around her. And in that arrogance, she left herself vulnerable. I started with Tyler. Nothing that could be traced back to me, just nudges, invisible hands guiding him toward mistakes. An outdated software version left active. A misfiled financial report. Slight inconsistencies in his emails that would make him look sloppy in front of Evelyn's team. Each action was small, innocuous, nothing that would raise alarm, except it did. To Tyler, the world began to feel unstable. The smooth control he prided himself on slipping, imperceptibly at first, then more obviously. Evelyn's first sign of worry came when a client called, frustrated over miscommunication. Tyler tried to fix it on his own, but his overconfidence was his enemy. I watched from a distance as he floundered, and I felt a quiet, almost imperceptible satisfaction. It wasn't about anger or revenge in the traditional sense. It was about exposing the fragility of their arrogance, letting them see that their control wasn't absolute. Evelyn began to micromanage, second-guessing Tyler at every turn. Meetings that used to run smoothly were now tense, filled with uncertainty. She started leaving her office doors slightly ajar, checking on him more often, and making more calls than necessary. And that's when I moved to phase 2. I reached out to contacts in Evelyn's industry, people she had relied on for years, people who had respected her authority. Quietly, I offered insight, assistance, sometimes small favors. Nothing that would seem connected to me. just enough to insert doubt and subtle disruption into her carefully curated network. Tyler, unaware of my involvement, began to crack. He sent panicked texts to Evelyn, trying to explain mistakes he didn't fully understand. She responded with thinly veiled frustration, her once unshakable confidence fraying at the edges. If you're enjoying this story so far, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss how this all comes crashing down. I spent evenings observing, cataloging reactions. Evelyn's pride was sensitive. She hated appearing incompetent. Tyler's ego was massive, but it was fragile, easily bruised when confronted with uncertainty. Each small error, each misstep, created ripple effects, undermining their world bit by bit. Then came the most satisfying moment so far. A project Evelyn had been confident about for months, a major pitch with a potential $2 million contract, began to unravel. Tyler had made a critical error, the kind that could have been prevented by anyone paying attention. Evelyn, stressed and distracted, failed to catch it until the client pointed it out. I didn't intervene. I didn't need to. I had set the stage, and they were performing exactly as I had predicted. Evelyn's voice, usually commanding, cracked in frustration. Tyler's smug confidence evaporated. And in that tiny room, I realized the first visible crack had appeared in their armor. For weeks, I continued this process. Every small error, every miscommunication, every overlooked detail was like a pebble tossed into a calm lake. The ripples grew larger, spreading through their lives. Friends noticed Evelyn's uncharacteristic stress. Colleagues noticed Tyler's growing tension. And neither of them had any idea that I, the man they had dismissed, underestimated, and openly scorned, was the one subtly guiding the chaos. I didn't revel in anger. I reveled in strategy. This was chess, not war. Every pawn, every knight, every minor disruption was calculated. I wasn't destroying them outright. I was forcing them to reveal their weaknesses, to falter under pressure, and to do so while believing they were still in control. One night, as I sat alone with my notes spread across the dining table, I realized the most beautiful part of this slow-burn revenge. They had no idea who their adversary was. Every panic, every misstep, every crack in confidence was a reflection of their own arrogance and carelessness. I had become the shadow they ignored, the invisible hand shaping their downfall. And yet, I waited. Patience was crucial. Too soon, and they might suspect me. Too late, and the opportunity for maximum impact might pass. Every day I observed, every interaction cataloged, every email carefully examined. It all fed into a plan that would culminate in a moment they never saw coming. I had spent 15 years being invisible, undervalued, dismissed. And now, for the first time, invisibility was my greatest weapon. The slow burn was working. The cracks were appearing. And when the final moment came, it would not just be about money or pride or authority. It would be about respect. The day finally arrived. I didn't rush. I never rushed. 15 years of preparation had taught me that timing is everything. Evelyn was hosting a major corporate gala in downtown Cleveland, a showcase of her firm's latest clients and achievements. Tyler would be there, of course, the golden boy, proud of every calculated move he had made. Both of them believed they were untouchable. Both were wrong. I arrived quietly, blending into the crowd of flashy suits and polite laughter. I wasn't noticed at first, and that was perfect. I could watch, unobtrusive, as the chaos I had orchestrated over months began to crystallize. Tyler had prepared a speech, one he had rehearsed endlessly, confident it would impress Evelyn's clients. He stepped up to the microphone, chest puffed out, and began. And immediately, the notes I had subtly swapped, the charts I had tampered with months ago, began to betray him. Figures were off, projections misaligned, and graphs that had been meticulously prepared now contradicted his confident statements. I watched as panic flickered across his face. He stumbled, trying to recover. The audience murmured. Evelyn, seated at the front, leaned forward, eyes narrowing, not in disbelief, but in irritation. She prided herself on control, and losing it, even momentarily, unsettled her. The first moment of true satisfaction came when a client called out a specific error, one I had planted weeks ago through an innocuous email to Tyler, masked as a routine attachment. He stammered. Evelyn intervened, but her tone, clipped and anxious, revealed cracks I had long anticipated. It was beautiful. I didn't gloat openly. I didn't need to. The humiliation, the tension, the visible unraveling of their confident facade was enough. Every guest could see it. Every colleague, every client, every observer. Tyler and Evelyn believed themselves untouchable, yet their empire of arrogance was trembling. After the speech, as the crowd dispersed into applause that was more polite than enthusiastic, I approached Tyler quietly. His eyes met mine, wide and uncomprehending, a mixture of panic, confusion, and anger. "Dad, what?" he began. I smiled, calm and deliberate. "Patience, Tyler. That's all it ever takes." Tyler shook his head, disbelief written across every line of his face. You set this up?" I didn't answer immediately. I let him feel the weight of 15 years of underestimation. 15 years of being dismissed, ignored, and undervalued. Let him recognize that invisibility can be a weapon more powerful than arrogance. Evelyn approached, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Her eyes, once so full of certainty, now flickered with unease. "Alex," her voice was composed, but her hands betrayed her. She had underestimated me, ignored me, and in doing so, allowed me to orchestrate a reckoning she could neither anticipate nor control. I let the moment stretch, the silence thick between us. Then I spoke, carefully, deliberately. "You built a world without me. You raised your son to despise me. You assumed I would remain irrelevant. I'm here to remind you that every action has consequences." Evelyn's eyes narrowed, but I saw hesitation. Tyler's face was a storm of fury and fear. The empire they had relied upon to validate themselves, built on their brilliance, yes, but also on their arrogance and blind spots, was wobbling. I didn't need to strike with malice. The groundwork had been laid. Their mistakes, magnified by their hubris, were unraveling everything they thought untouchable. Tyler sputtered, searching for words, for an explanation, for someone to blame. Evelyn's control wavered. The confident leader was replaced with a woman realizing that not all variables are predictable. I stepped closer, quietly, and said something I had rehearsed only in my mind. "You see now what patience, observation, and understanding can do. You didn't notice, but I have always been here, watching, learning, waiting." And then I left them there. Not humiliated beyond repair, not destroyed, but shaken, destabilized, and acutely aware that I was no longer irrelevant. That my quiet sacrifices, my patient observation, my long-forgotten value had finally been recognized, not by them, but by the world around them. Back in my apartment that night, I sat quietly, sipping cold coffee, letting the satisfaction settle. It wasn't about money or power. It wasn't about revenge in the petty sense. It was about respect, about recognition for a lifetime spent being overlooked and underestimated. I thought about Evelyn, brilliant and ruthless, and Tyler, arrogant and untested. They had believed themselves untouchable, and for the first time, they understood differently. Patience, I realized, is more powerful than fury. Observation outweighs arrogance. And when timing is right, the quietest person in the room can shake the foundation of the most confident. I smiled, genuinely, for the first time in years. This wasn't about winning. This was about reclaiming what had always been mine. Dignity, respect, and the knowledge that invisibility, when wielded correctly, is a weapon no one can see coming. The slow burn was complete. If you love this story, like, comment your thoughts below, and share it with someone who's ever been underestimated. Click the next video to see the story of another slow burn revenge that pays off brilliantly.